So you can tell I'm hello everybody, let's try that again. You can tell I've not been with you for a couple of weeks there with my microphone muted. Let's hope that's not a taste of things to come. Hello, welcome. It's a very special Fridays Live today. It is, of course, St. Patrick's Day. So I'm dressed in green. We've got some green eyeshadow going on here. So let us know where you're joining in from. I can see we've already got Gillian joining from Edinburgh. Hello, hello, hello. And I'm delighted to introduce Daisy. Daisy is our wonderful brand copywriter and researcher. And Daisy's in the comments today. So we are a flower power duo today, myself and Daisy. And yeah, Daisy is a keen historian, so do make her very welcome, as I'm sure you all will. Just seeing who's joining now. We've got a lot. We've got Rosina from Claremont from Florida. Janet's joining from North Wales. Matthew watching from Watford, you're not too far away from me. David's joining from Somerset over on YouTube. Debbie, hello, joining us from Pennsylvania. And Rosie from Shropshire. Ellen from Illinois. Emma from Telford, hello. Patty over on YouTube from Phoenix. Bev from London, Canada. Great to see you all today. We had a very rainy start here in London today, a very soggy morning for St. Patrick's Day, but it's getting a bit more sunny now, and I'm actually joined today by my cat Panda, who is behind me. So he might wake up and want his tea at some point, but at the moment he is fast asleep. So we've got to see who else is joining us. We've got Vicky from Ontario, Sue Moon from Guildford, Jenny joining us from Devon. Hello, Victoria. Yes, happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. And Susan, the So Stormy Thunder Bay, Canada. Gosh, stay warm out there. Anya, Grey Hair and Fife. Happy St. Gertrude's Day. It's St. Gertrude's Day as well. We've got lots of patron saints. St. Gertrude's Day, the original crazy cat lady. I was just actually reading something about Gertrude just now. And we've got Bob over on YouTube. Starting time locally now 9 a.m. as we're on daylight savings, and England still on standard time for the next 2 weeks. Yes, this is the thing. So across the pond, I think time has changed, daylight savings kicking in, and we don't have that for the next few weeks. Hello, everybody. Right. So yeah, St. Patrick's Day today. How does anybody celebrate St. Patrick's Day? I have a good group of Irish friends here in London, so I've been celebrating St. Patrick's Day pretty regularly now for the last sort of 5 years or so. And our question of the week will be appropriately Irish themed, and it is: what discoveries have you made about your Irish ancestors? So I'd love to hear them, and don't worry if you don't have any Irish ancestors. There might even be some Irish ancestors in your tree lurking there somewhere, waiting to be discovered. So we'll be sharing some top tips for your Irish ancestry as we go along today. And we're also going to take a look at Irish newspapers on Findmypast, because it's me and we need to have our monthly dose of newspapers. And here's an example of an Irish newspaper. And this is the St. Patrick's Day special back from 1898. And this is the Weekly Freeman, and it's a Dublin-based newspaper. And St. Patrick's Day was a big thing even back then, and definitely more profound at the turn of the century, with the Irish nationalism movement growing in strength. So this drawing is a particularly potent and powerful one, declaring unity is strength, and also outlining that very special relationship with the United States. Oh, this is a good tip from Anya. Mr. Google says the patron saint of family history is Saint Theodore of Tarsus. Wonderful. I think we need to do a piece on him. I'm going to do some research after this. Thank you for sharing. On to our new records of the week, and they are appropriately Irish themed. We've got new records joining our Ireland Calendar of Wills and Administrations collection, and we've also got a brand new collection in the Ireland Inland Revenue Wills and Administrations. So the two different but similar sets, and both really really fascinating ones, and they're a real treasure trove of genealogical information, as we're going to find out. So we'll dive in. Perfect. So first up is the Ireland Calendar of Wills and Administrations collection. So these are the district probate registers from Armagh, Belfast and Londonderry. And these new records cover the years 1921 all the way to 1965. So we're really hitting some key points in Irish history here, as well as giving us some really lovely modern material. So what can we learn from these records? You get the name of the deceased date of death and their county, and also the name of their executors. So we can see a record for Mary Catherine Maguire here. She died on the 7th of March 1927 in County Londonderry. And we get the names of her executors too. So we've got Joseph G. O'Kane and Patrick O'Connell. And what I would really recommend with this set too is to click the link to the original source, and if you search the name there, you get some really useful extra information. So you learn the residence. Mary Catherine Maguire was from, I'm going to muck up the pronunciation, I have been practicing my own Irish pronunciation, but there are a few that are a little tricky. So she was from Cúnasala. She was a spinster, and her probate was granted on the 15th of September. And we learned that Joseph O'Kane was her solicitor, and Patrick O'Connell, mentioned there, was a farmer. And what I found with this collection, it really helps if you use the newspapers in tandem. And this is sort of my overarching sort of theme for Irish history is check out Irish newspapers. They are so useful, and more on that later. But this particular collection really comes to life when you use them in parallel with our newspaper collection. So within the Calendar of Wills and Administrations, I found the wonderfully named Edwin Best Cinnamon. Edwin Best Cinnamon is a great name. And he passed away on the 30th of July, 1942 in County Armagh. And from this time, we have a lot of newspaper material. And I was able to learn from the newspapers that Edwin was a shopkeeper. And there's lots of information about Edwin in our newspapers, lots of clippings there that I've pulled out. And the far left one is from the Frontier Sentinel on the 8th of August 1942. So this is a week after Edwin has passed away. He is described as a familiar and popular figure, and his funeral was held at Mullaglass Cemetery. So newspapers again can really help bring this collection to life, and we learn more about Edwin from them, from the article from the Frontier Sentinel. So we learn that he and his father, William, had actually come from County Down, from Castle Welland, and they settled in Bessbrook, County Armagh, where he and his sons would stay. So Edwin, at the time of his death, he just turned 80, and back in 1886 he started a business with his brothers as bakers, grocers and general merchants. And I love this. He was noted for his integrity and Christian charity. It's lovely to have that written about you. And then we move on to another article from the Belfast Telegraph, which is published in January 1943, which reveals the value of Edwin's estate. So it was worth £7,182, and he had bequeathed £500 for charities, for such charities as the executives might select. So he truly was a charitable man. And we actually get sort of the actual bones, the actual details from Edwin's will, from the Northern Whig. And the Northern Whig publishes some legal notices. So these can be really useful in just finding out a bit more about your ancestors' will. And this was published in February 1943, and it's in that sort of glorious, lovely, formal legal language, which kind of understand, kind of don't understand, but it relates to the charitable request that was given by Edwin in his will. And so it says, I give and bequeath the sum of £500 free of all death duties to such charity or charities or charitable object or objects, and such shares and proportions as my executors may in his or their absolute discretion select and decide. So he's basically leaving it up to his executors to decide which charity he'd like to donate to. And the notice was posted by solicitors Johnson and Rutherford. And if we go back to the original record, we see that Edwin's second executor is Henry Arthur Rutherford, his solicitor. So our next collection here is another fascinating one, and it's again wills, and it's again some administrations. So this will again help you discover whether your ancestor left a will or had their estate administrated. But this particular collection, which is brand new to the site, is slightly earlier. So it goes all the way back to 1828, and this collection contains some incredibly rare surviving records. And I can see in the chat, and we'll come back to this, how tricky Irish genealogy is, how tricky Irish family history is. And that is because so many of the records were destroyed. So in 1922, the fire at the Four Courts in Dublin destroyed many of the records that were held in the record office. So it just make life that extra bit harder for those of us with Irish ancestors. But this is a good one. This particular collection, it's one of the survivors, and yeah, it's going back all the way to 1828. And this collection, it kind of falls into two parts. So all the years in this collection between 1828 and 1879, they are covered by the indexes. But the years 1828 to 1839 are covered by surviving registers. So the registers have a bit more detail, which is great, because that earlier period gets slightly more detail than we do later on. And this collection does come with the original images as well. So you could, for all of the records between 1828 and 1879, there are the original images to consult as well. So what information can we get from this set? So both the indexes and the registers will include the names and addresses of the deceased, as well as those of the executor or the administrator, and the name of the court where probate was granted. Meanwhile, the registers will include the date of the person's death and the date of their will, the relation of the executor or the administrator to the deceased, and the value of the estate. And this is a real sort of cherry on the top. You might even get a description or the inventory of the estate. So what they were worth, what their estate was made up of, and also the names of the beneficiaries. And as I was browsing through our newspaper archive, I came across this really evocative photograph from our newspaper collection. It's a funeral party slowly ascending to the little graveyard at Derrynane in County Kerry. Just found that really, really evocative one, and that was published in the Sphere in 1919. So let's have a little look a bit more closely at this fantastic collection. And we've got the record here of Elizabeth Bourke, who died on the 17th of February 1828. And we can see that her will was made a few months before, on the 11th of November 1827. And we learn that her residence was Green Cottage, County Mayo. So nothing sort of beyond the Green Cottage and the county, but we get the county, so that's good. And her executor was Henry Bullen of Naas, County Kildare. So this is where I just always say it, but have a look at the original image that is alongside this transcription, because there's some great extras written down here. So like I mentioned before, you can sometimes find the details of the estate written down, and we get that here. We learn that she bequeaths her property, including debts, and a bequest from the late Bridget Brown to the value of £2,000. So it's not, she's quite a wealthy woman for that time. £2,000 in 1828 is going to be worth quite a lot of money. I always used my indicator for estimating wealth in that particular time. I think of Jane Austen. I think of Mr. Darcy, who's worth £10,000 a year. So we know, so £2,000 is going to be quite a lot. Yeah, that Elizabeth is quite a wealthy woman, and we also learn about her inventory and what that was worth. So she's got heavy goods that are worth £14, and she's got stocks that are worth £36, giving a total of £50 there in her inventory. So the detail here is just really wonderful, especially considering this document is nearly 200 years old. It's just wonderful. And there's another little extra note here. I kept looking at this one and being like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. That Elizabeth releases several individuals from payment of small sums of money in her death. So that was nice. So it seems we've got quite a charitable theme going on here. And these little snippets make this a really, really special record set. So yeah, let's go back to, Anya. I love Pride and Prejudice, especially the BBC version. In my opinion, the BBC version is just the best version. They should have stopped making any versions after that with Colin Firth. Just my favourite thing in the world. Right, so let's go on to our question of the week, and it is, what discoveries have you made about your Irish ancestors? And I found this when I was researching for today. I found this wonderful patchwork of Ireland, and I found that in the Illustrated London News that was from February 1980. I just love that. And so I'm just going to look through and see what answers we've got coming through. So just a reminder again, question of the week, what discoveries have you made about your Irish ancestors? And Sue Moon has a really interesting question here before we dive into answers. Does anybody have any idea why my 2 times great-grandfather's probate took 12 years after his accidental death to be published? I don't know whether there was some delay because there was an accidental death, perhaps going through the courts. That would be my guess. I might have to consult with some of my learned colleagues on that, Sumin, and get back to you. And goodness, it's Jessie. Jessie has returned to say hello. Hello, how are you getting on, Jessie? Just popping in to say big hello to Rose and the Friday friends. I miss you all. We miss you all, Jessie. We miss you too. And yes, Anya sort of agreeing. I think that probably sounds right to me, that it could have been an accidental death, and just sort of working that out. And legal processes take a very long time. Again, I'm referring to literature, Bleak House, that was the whole thing. That took a very long time to get through the courts. So I am just going to go through the answers, scrolling up. So Sue Moon, we'll start with you. Question of the week, lol. My grandmother and great-grandmother are conspicuous by their absence, but have got my great-grandfather's maternal line roughly documented back to the 1800s. Yeah, I think we will it will be this recurring theme that Irish history is hard, but amazing that you managed to get back to the 1800s there. And Rosie, a lot of info on my Kerry Keatings and the almost definite link to a cousin commemorated for his part in the Easter Rising. Oh, wow. That is really incredible to have, very special there, Rosie. Gillian, trying to find anything on my Irish ancestors is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but I still keep trying. I empathise. I mean, I managed to trace my Irish ancestors back to about 1800, but getting there and beyond that is really, really tricky. So I'm lucky enough to have got that back that far. Will caveat that by saying they came over to England in about 1820, so I get the benefit of the fuller census coverage from there. And Andrew, he's been lucky. Yes, had extra luck with my great-great-grandfather, whose place of birth is given in 1871 and 1851. He left Ireland in January 1851 and was on a ship to India in April 1851. Oh, that is really good information to have. Similarly, in tracing my Irish ancestors, one of them sometimes would put Liverpool as a place of birth, sometimes would put Ireland. I wonder, maybe he was fearful of sort of prejudice. I'm not quite sure on that one. So it makes it a bit more elusive to track our ancestors down. My 4 times great-grandfather is from Wexford. Karen, no known Irish found through research, but a little bit of Irish DNA, 1%. So that might be erroneous. I mean, that's, as I said before, I think that because of the pattern of migration from Ireland and following the famine to the United States, to Canada, Australia, and England, it's likely that there will, if you have roots in those places, it's likely you will have a little bit of Irish, that 1%. Anya, I have Irish ancestors through 3 of my 4 grandparents, but my favourite is Robert Carey from Westmeath, who fought at Corunna and Waterloo while serving with the 42nd Regiment of Foot during the Napoleonic Wars. I'm reading that and I'm thinking Sharp, one of my favourite series. It sounds like something out of Sharp. I love that. Pickles. We've got a brick wall here, I can see. Current brick wall is trying to find the birthplace and parents of my second great-grandfather, William Mullins, who was apparently born in Ireland, but at the time his daughter Catherine was born, he was living in Greenwich, and at the time of her marriage was written down as police sergeant deceased. I've been stuck on this ancestor for a long time. All tips welcome. Oh, that sounds like a juicy one. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure the community will be able to assist. Definitely keep going with that one, Pickles, and let us know anything that you find there. And Daphne, hello Daphne. We've got a few Camerons that went from Scotland to Ireland in search of and found a bride. I haven't researched any Irish yet. Keep us posted on that, Daphne. Anne, these DNA tests are really something. I didn't get any Irish when I did my DNA test, and like Anne, she's got Daly as her maiden name. My mother's maiden name is Maguire, and it's the Irish Maguire. So I was very much expecting some Irish DNA back, and I didn't get any. I got some Welsh though, so that would account for the Celtic colouring. Just seeing Judith here, who's tuning in from Melbourne with a total firebound warning and 30 degrees forecast for today. Oh my word. I hope you're managing to stay cool, Judith. Bless you. I'm just going through, seeing any more answers. Matthew, I still can't find them. These elusive Irish ancestors. We've got John Donovan, who was born circa 1837 in Ireland, Cork County, I think, and his wife Elizabeth Sullivan was born circa 1840 in Cork. Know the names of the fathers from their London marriage, but still can't find the births. Yeah, this is where it gets tricky. General registration in Ireland happened later on than it did in the UK. So for births, marriages and deaths, I think it was the 1860s. And then we're up against the fact that many of these records were destroyed. So this can be a real sticking point. My advice, as always, newspapers, and Panda's advice too, because Panda's just jumped up to advice as well. Just seeing any more. We've got Judith. 4 ancestral lines originating from Ireland, including a male and female convict transported to Australia. Oh, fascinating stuff. Roxanne. Oh, we got a fresh, hot off the press discovery. I love this. She finally found some record of my 3 times great grandmother this morning. Still no clues as to where in Ireland she was born or who her parents were, but she now exists out of my personal collection. I'm hopeful I'll be able to make some progress now. Well, it's very exciting news, and keep us posted, please do. And Yale, here I have got back to late 1700s in Wexford, an area I was unaware of until research, as my father and grandmother were both Dublin. I'm trying to find a connection with a Marguerite. Wexford. My Irish family comes from Wexford too. We might be related. Any Maguires in your tree? Let me know. We've got Kim here. I still cannot find a baptism for my supposed Cork-born 3 times great-grandmother, but I did find a photograph of her son instead. Oh wow, we love a photograph. We love a photograph. Amazing. We've got lots of Irish ancestors coming through. Gillian knows that her 3 times great-grandfather was born in Northern Ireland. He was a dance master and a teacher of music, but trying to find anything about his parents and any siblings he had is difficult. And trying to find anything about my great-grandfather's the biggest brick wall ever. I'm going to say it again. Maybe have a look at newspapers. That does sound like an intriguing prospect there. Brilliant. Okay. Anya, Panda, you're famous. Where are you now? He's probably wanting his tea. More. Bev. I found Quaker records in County Armagh from the mid-1600s and early 1700s with tithes, paid, birth, marriage and burials. It confirmed information I found about my ancestor who left for Pennsylvania in America in 1689. So wonderful to have. Oh, Bev, that's amazing, getting back that far and such early emigration there. That's really wonderful. And Ellen suggests patience. I found a record of my 2nd times great-grandfather coming to the States in 1853, and his naturalization papers say he's from Leitrim, so plan to find him later. It's great. It's some really, really, really wonderful, some research starting off, some research completed. So do always let us know how you're getting on. And yeah, let's I've been going on about them. Let's have a look at newspapers, Irish newspapers. Perfect. Okay. As we said, Irish family history can be very difficult. What I find really helps with it is newspapers. And we have a great collection of newspapers on Findmypast, which can be a really valuable tool in your Irish family history research. So it fills in those gaps. You might be able to find announcements of births, marriages and deaths, bringing you those important family links. You might find other information like court appearances, or if your ancestor made the news. And again, within those articles, you might even find those family links. And we have over 7 million newspaper pages for Ireland in total. So that's just over 5 million pages for the Republic of Ireland and 2 million for Northern Ireland. And in terms of issues, we've got 955,000 newspaper issues for Ireland. And actually, some of our Irish material accounts for our very oldest newspapers, from our earliest newspaper content. We're looking all the way back to 1704, with newspapers like Pew's Occurrences and the Dublin Intelligence. And our Irish newspapers are actually some of our most contemporary newspapers. They are as recent as 2009, with the likes of Dublin's Evening Herald and the Irish Independent. So all of this amounts to 350 years of Irish headlines. So how do we get to these wonderful newspapers? Let's have a look. Right, so you're going to head to search and then newspapers and periodicals. And you have the opportunity, once you're here, to switch between our collections, both British and Irish. So that's there on the left-hand side. And you can see help articles and further details about our Irish newspaper collections, which is super useful. And I can see Daisy has posted the link there if you'd like to go and have a browse. And so let's have a dive into this wonderful collection. And I'm going to go way back, not as far back as, who was it with it was Bev with her 1689 ancestor. Not going to go that far back, but nearly. So I'm going to look at this wonderful newspaper, Pew's Occurrences, which was actually recommended to me by a colleague, Aoife O'Connor, who is one of our Irish history experts. And this title described itself as containing the most authentic and freshest translations from all parts, carefully collected and impartially translated. And indeed, it began as the Impartial Occurrences, published by Edward Lloyd in December 1703, with Richard Pew as its editor. It ceased publication in 1706, but was revived in February 1712, this time as Pew's Occurrences, and it continued after editor Richard Pew's death in 1722, so it was carried on actually by his wife and his son. So why have I picked this one out in particular? It's going to be hard to get your Irish ancestry all the way back to this era. But for those of us, who do have Irish ancestors, like I know my family, part of my family was in Ireland at this time, it provides a wonderful social context for them. So what this newspaper gives you is really the sights, the sounds, the smells of an early modern Dublin. An early modern Dublin that was still quite medieval in parts, as in Britain, in terms of sort of the crime and punishment, people in the stocks. It's a difficult time. And what was also quite interesting about newspapers from this time is you get the place names, and some of these place names will have changed or they might be recognisable to you today. So I think it just really gives such a great sense of place. And I just wanted to give you sort of a flavour of Pew's and sort of the things that you could find in it. And this is from August 1749. It says, Friday even last, a labourer fell from a scaffold in William Street, by which accident his leg was broken, otherwise hurt, so it was thought that he could not live. And then under that, we get a description of a fire and then of a marriage. So all of this sort of collated together in one space. And the marriage, this is between Robert King, an alderman of Dublin, to Miss Nancy King, daughter of the late David King, a goldsmith. And I just love this description of Nancy, a most agreeable young lady of fine accomplishment, sweet temper, and a large fortune. So again, sort of sounds very Jane Austen. And I've picked out this piece on the right from September 1756, which also gives the latest from Dublin, although this time revealing its slightly seedy underbelly. Early in the morning, several young ladies of pleasure, together with an old procuress, were taken by the watch out of a house in Copper Alley and lodged in Newgate for picking a gentleman's pocket of a large sum of money and his watch. And then we learn below that a horrible accident. A young woman was taking up a pitcher of water at the slip above Bloody Bridge. She fell in and was unfortunately drowned. And we get another fire. There's a woman being run over by a car in the corn market. And finally, a man sat for a considerable time in the stocks at the throttle for impudent behaviour before the Right Honourable Lord Mayor. So we really get this rich tapestry of London life. The heroes, the villains, the unlucky ones, the risks and dangers of every day. And it's just a real wonderful source and a great pleasure to browse. So let's leave the 18th century behind and dive into the 19th century. And we still have those sort of quick fire flash updates, the 1 or 2 sentence updates that we see in Pew's Occurrences, like these ones from the Belfast Weekly Post, which you can, Belfast Weekly News even, which you can see on the left-hand side. For example, we find out that a woman named Catherine Gaffney was charged and then acquitted over the abandonment of her child. And then a respectable farmer and butter buyer was charged with the larceny of a firkin of butter from Mr. Lonsdale of Armagh. He was found guilty, but mercy was recommended in this case. And then at Cavan Courthouse, one Rose Maguire was found guilty of stealing 2 pillow covers and a quantity of flour, and she received 1 month in prison. So you get your bad apples in our Irish newspapers, but of course, life was very hard at this time in Ireland, just a few decades after the famine, and many were emigrating. So again, it is sort of hard to judge by today's standards. And also in our Irish newspapers, which makes them so valuable for genealogical information, you'll find mentions of births, marriages and deaths, like you can see from the newspaper clipping in the centre. And this is from the Cork Examiner in August 1874. And what I found very touching here is amongst the births, a stillbirth was actually recorded, the son of Robert O'Toole and his wife from Dublin, which I found very moving. And then under deaths, one that stood out to me as well was the death of Michael Walsh at Baltimore, youngest son of the late John Walsh of Athy. And the really, really key thing here with our Irish newspapers, and indeed British ones from the time too, they often keep track of those who had emigrated from their local area and left. So they do provide that link back across the Atlantic. So you could find out what had happened to someone who had left. And again, you can, and emigration is, such a key theme in Ireland at this time, and you can see that in our newspapers. For example, that cutting on the far right from the Midland Tribune from September 1882, the heading reads "Emigrate, emigrate, emigrate," and there's the description of the safest and fastest line of steamships that you could travel in. You could buy your fare for £3 from General Emigration Agent Michael Madden, and you could go to New York, Boston, Quebec, Philadelphia, and other destations. So probably Michael Walsh, whose death is listed some years before in 1874, had elected to emigrate and had probably, maybe seen such an advert in the newspapers and contacted such a man as Michael Madden. And just a look, classic rabbit hole, as we do, I found a record of Michael Walsh being born to a John Walsh in Athy in what was Queen's County, now County Laois, and also it's part of County Kildare as well, in 1840. And then in 1866, we find Michael in our Baltimore passenger lists, emigrating at the age of 25. So he's entered Baltimore on the 31st of May on the Somerset. And we also learned that he's single. And we see him again in our 1870 US Census, living in Baltimore with a German family. He's working as a clerk. We know by 1874 that he's passed away. So this entry is just 4 years before his death. So what happened to Michael? And this is where we find Michael Walsh in 1874 in our Baltimore Roman Catholic parish burial records. His age is given as about 35, which checks with our census, emigration, and baptism records. And his cause of death is given as injury. Interesting. And he is interred at St. Vincent Cemetery in Baltimore. And there's a really fascinating note attached to this entry, reminding us to always check the image, which reads, "Died from injury received at the hands of another." Died from injury received at the hands of another. So a rather convoluted way of recording a murder, perhaps manslaughter. But anyway, which way, it marked a tragic end to Michael Walsh's life, which had begun in Athy and ended in Baltimore. And so recorded both sides of the Atlantic. And I see Anya's also gone down a true crime rabbit hole when looking for a fan surname in Cork. I don't know if the man who was guilty was a close relative or more distant, as Hankard isn't a very common surname. Oof. We love our crime stories here at Findmypast. So we're going to go right now into the 20th century for our Irish newspaper coverage. And don't forget that we go right into the 21st century with these holdings. And again, these newspapers pages provide us with a wonderful, wonderful context, very, very name rich. So it's just always worth consulting. And don't forget that you can use on our newspaper search. It enables you to search by first and last name. So don't forget to take advantage of that capability. And I've put out this article from October 1911 from the weekly Freeman's Journal. And it relates to some disturbances in Galway after a group of 19 men were accused of causing grievous bodily harm to members of the Royal Irish Constabulary by attacking them with stones at Ballybit Racecourse on the evening of the concluding day of the Galway races. So get the names of the officers who were attacked and also the names of the defendants. And the defendants included one Martin Hosty. And Martin Hosty was accused of striking Constable Barrett with a tent pole. And then we learned from the Londonderry Sentinel. Again, note how within Ireland news travels. So we've got this Galway case reported in the Weekly Freeman's Journal. So that's a Dublin newspaper. And then it's reported again in this Londonderry newspaper. We learned that Martin Hosty, alongside some of his other defendants, had their cases dismissed. So a relief from them. But this does bring us on to a record set you might have missed, and Daisy has kindly posted the link there. And as we have touched on crime a little, and that is the Irish prison registers. We'll say hi, Jane. Welcome. Hope you've had a good day. So these Irish prison registers, they feature the names of over 3 million people who served times in jails across Ireland from 1790 through to 1924. And as we've said, we love a rogue here at Findmypast, and we've all got one in our family trees, maybe one or two, maybe more. And this set is a real genealogical gem for a country where genealogical information is sparse. So what information does this record set contain? Well, you'll find names, you'll find details like the name, address and age of the prisoner, but also their place of birth, their occupation, their level of education, their religion, their next of kin, and even a physical description. So this is a wonderful set to actually paint a picture of your ancestor. But alongside that, you get these genealogical snippets of information, such as next of kin, a birthplace, which is so useful when there is such sparse census coverage. And you'll also learn the details of their crime, which sometimes even includes a victim's name. And you'll also learn about the sentence, the type of sentence that was handed down, the dates of their admission to prison and their release, or in some cases, the date of their death. So here's a picture of the infamous Kilmainham jail, which was in Dublin, and that's from the Sphere in 1909. And the jail was closed in 1924. There were many Irish revolutionaries imprisoned here and executed here. And just about visible, that was pretty tiny in this photograph. At the far right is the staff on the top of the building. So a black flag would be raised there to signal that an execution had taken place. So some further views of Kilmainham here. The condemned man's cell is pictured on the left. I find that very eerie. And on the right, the exercise yard. So you kind of get an impression of what your ancestor or whoever you're researching encountered. And you can see records, and you can search the records for Kilmainham jail as part of this collection. So it's always, when I'm sort of looking and researching these historical places, I always have a dive into newspapers to see if there's any images which, from the time that sort of really brings it to life a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to our tent pole wielding Martin Hosty. And this is the transcription of his record from the Irish Prison Registers collection for his actions in that disturbance at the Galway races back in 1911. And we learn that he is 28 and that he was born and living in Castlegar, County Galway. And I did have to look this one up because I know there's a Castlebar in County Mayo. Good friends from there. But no, this is Castlegar in County Galway. And we see that he is a prisoner and that his offence is described as assault police. And we also learn the name of his father, Thomas Hosty. We learn that he was received into the prison on the 11th of August, 1911. So that is the Galway prison. And let's get to the image because there's a lot of treats for us here. Always consult that image. So I've broken this image down into a couple of shots because there's always a lot going on. Oh, Daphne's popping off. Bless you, Daphne. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Have a lovely weekend, Daphne. So the first image here on the top left is for Martin Hosty. His age is 28, and we learn his height. So he stands at 5'7" and 3/4. So very, very precise. And those extra quarters are important. I count myself as 5'4" and 1/4, and that quarter is very important. And we also learn that he has dark brown hair, hazel eyes, and a fresh complexion. So I just love these descriptions, and there's more in this particular register. And there's a section which is for marks on person, and Martin has a cut mark on the crown of his head, and also a vaccination mark at his arm. So before fingerprinting was a widespread method of identifying criminals, these robust descriptions of scars and the way that somebody looked would be useful at identifying repeat offenders. And also in this register, you get the prisoner's weight. So we go into that level of detail. In case we're interested, Martin Hosty was 158 pounds when he was taken into custody. There's also a column. Oh, we've got a. You're interested in the prison records panda. Yes, he's a keen genealogist. So there's also a column for weight when somebody left the prison. So you can sort of see whether they had gained weight, lost weight. And actually, for the ones that I've seen, it actually looks like the prisoners had gained weight. And I wonder if that was due to them having a more regular food supply within prison. And yeah, Daisy, she's found some great details. I found out that my 2 times great grandfather had crooked teeth, a scar on his cheek, and a star tattoo on his left hand. Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, Matthew. The cat wants to know his ancestry. Yes, yeah, we'll find that out for you, Panda. And Roxanne, same height. I used to be short to add the quarter because my younger sister was 5'4" and the only one of my siblings shorter than me. I'm definitely the shortest. I just like to have the extra quarter. So anyway, back to Martin Hosty. We also learn his occupation. He's a labourer. We get the name of his father. And there's even more. He's single, he's a Roman Catholic, and he can read and write. And now on to his crime, which we know is assault on police, his sentence, which is remand, and then his discharge. There's a lot of detail here. It really is incredible. And it is just fascinating browsing these records. You know, I spent several hours going through them, and just looking at sort of the different types of offenders. We've got these juvenile prisoners here from Grange Gorman Female Prison in Dublin in 1854. And there are girls as young as 10 listed here, like Ellen Leonard from Cork, who was sentenced to 14 days imprisonment for begging. And just can't imagine how difficult life must have been at this time, especially for Ellen. And tellingly, there's a column entitled With or Without Parents. Ellen is without a father, and others like 16-year-old Mary Whelan are orphaned. So they've been in prison for begging, so you're in prison for trying to make a living. So tough. And here we have an extract from Mountjoy Female Prison in Dublin from 1900. And this register is a bit more similar to the one that Martin Hosty appeared in. You have the physical descriptions, the lists of marks, the names of the next of kin, and more detailed offence information. So offences listed here ranged from threatening behaviour to assault, from larceny of a pair of canvas slippers to drunk and disorderly. And one of the prisoners listed here is Henrietta Talley, who's at Mountjoy in 1900. So Henrietta is 32. She's 5'1.5". She's quite wee. She's got brown hair and hazel eyes, a fresh complexion with a cut mark just above her right brow. Now, Henrietta's crime was to sell porter unlicensed. And for this crime, selling porter unlicensed, she's given 1 calendar month's imprisonment, in which she gains a few pounds. So again, perhaps food was more regular in prison than one could expect elsewhere. Now, the prison register here gives Henrietta's birthplace as St George's Street, and her residence as 6th Faithful Place. And actually, we find her in the 1901 census in the North Dock region of Dublin, living at Faithful Place. She's 33. She's out of prison at this time, and she's listed as being widowed. And interestingly, it says that she was born in England. So we've got that sort of vague St George's Street in the prison register, and now we sort of know, she's English, okay. And that does tally again with some of the information that we actually find in the prison registers. We see that her next of kin is given as her sister, Mrs. Finnegan of Silvertown, London. So that there is that English connection. And these breadcrumbs become very important as we attempt to tell Henrietta's story. So it's likely then that Henrietta, unlike her fellow inmates, is English. And there's also slightly as well her religion. She's Protestant amongst the majority Roman Catholic prison population. And this isn't the only mention of Henrietta in our Irish prison register set. So I counted over 30 times. She's mentioned over 30 times in the Irish prison registers as both a prisoner and a victim. So her crimes range from soliciting in 1897 to profane and abusive language in 1903, from being drunk and disorderly in 1900 to illegally selling spirits in 1902. So we can say that our Henrietta is something of a habitual criminal, but she was also a victim too. So in 1903, she is listed as the victim of an assault committed by 34-year-old Michael Fagan. Fagan wasn't imprisoned, he was released on remand. But after 1903, we don't see Henrietta again in our prison registers. Yeah, so Nico's got a good question here over on YouTube. Would fresh complexion be the equivalent of saying clear skin? My ancestors are described as dark, fresh, pale, sallow on the Irish prison registers. So that is how I would interpret it. I would sort of see that as on the way to pale, but maybe with sort of those rosy cheeks. I am imagining. That's a very good question. Okay, Panda, thank you. Yes, thank you, Panda. It's become the Panda show. Yeah, I was wondering what happened to Henrietta after 1903, because that 1903 is the last mention of Henrietta in the Irish prison registers. So you can imagine my surprise when she turned up in the 1921 census of England and Wales. And she gives her age as 50, still a widow. And it's signed by her as well. And we know that she can read and write from the Irish prison registers. And key thing that sort of linked this together as being Henrietta, that birthplace of St. George's, and it was frustratingly hard to read. St. George's, London. I mean, there are a couple of places where that could mean, but I think sort of enough to tie her to this both this census and the Irish prison registers. So our Henrietta is working as a charwoman. She's casually working and living in Spitalfields in London's East End. And we know that she had East End connections because her sister, Mrs. Finnegan, was living in Silvertown, which is in London's East End. So, we have that connection. And she's living in a one-room home. And gosh, I think times are probably still very hard for Henrietta at the time of the census, but she survived. She got herself out of a difficult and abusive situation in Dublin to return back to London. So this kind of rather sparse census entry here, a rather lonely entry, I found to be very moving. And Henrietta is recorded as passing away some 2 years later in 1923 in Whitechapel. So that's the general area where she was living. And hers must have been an unimaginably hard life, but it is a real privilege to be able to trace it using the records available on Findmypast. So I think we will wrap up there before Panda tries to eat me. It's his tea time. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and going through some of our very special Irish records. So wishing everybody a very happy St. Patrick's Day today. If you're celebrating, I might have a glass of 2 of Guinness later, or indeed a baby Guinness, in moderation, of course. And it's breaking news with Matthew. Possible breakthrough. I love this. We found my ancestor Catherine Flynn. There's a Catherine Flynn, daughter of Daniel, christened at Yothwell Parish in County Cork on 15th of March 1840. The year fits with the info I have, and his mother is named Bridget. Bravo, Matthew. That's amazing. So that's a positive find to make our way into the weekend with. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Have a lovely weekend, and we will be back with you next week. Take care. Goodbye.